How did I get from all of these books, and many others besides, to these 3 books? I'm going to be talking today about how books have helped me research these novels, including this verse novel. Primary sources not only ground you in the period, but also can provide some interesting plot twists. This collection of letters by Rabbi Meir, as he responded to questions of Jewish observance from medieval Jews, was an amazing resource. I disagreed with a lot of what my rabbi ancestor said, and I let Shira, my fictional character, voice those disagreements. This accounting of the miracle portrait of the Virgin Mary in Ancona, Italy, was not only key to the plot, but also introduced me to some real-life characters. And as I am researching the sequel to Beyond the Ghetto Gates, this chronicle by a native Muslim gives me a sense of what the Egyptians felt about the French occupation. One of the jobs of the historical novelist is to, of course, explore the events of the day. And so you need to find books that are very specific to your time, as well as to your little patch of geography. But in addition to this, what you want to do is you want to find out what's happening throughout the world. And so you need to dip into books about that as well, because your characters are going to be talking about that. One great way to do this is by investigating the newspapers of the time, whether in books or elsewhere. And I should add that in Beyond the Ghetto Gates in particular, Napoleon was a key manipulator of the press. If you're writing about famous characters, as I did when I wrote about William Shakespeare and Napoleon Bonaparte, you're going to find a plethora of biographies about these characters. The problem is that they can be very large and very weighty. And if you feel compelled to read the whole thing and all of them, you're going to spend more time on research than you need to. My advice, read from the beginning because you need to know their motivations. And then when you get to the point where your novel ends, very carefully and firmly put the book down. You may be asked in book talks about what happened next. I will lend you my response. You can say, I'm a historical novelist. I don't know what happens next. Maybe that's my next book. As a historical novelist or writer of any kind of book, you have to do significant world building. This means knowing how your characters lived during that time period. So what you want to know is more about how they dressed, what the manners of the time period were, how they traveled, and any other details that you can find about that. Because I was writing specifically about the Jews, I also looked for books that were specific to my segment of the population, and luckily I found them. I also like looking in cookbooks, finding recipes, and learning more about the dress of the time. Speaking of Jane Austen, as we do in this book, I also want to talk about how literature can help inform your research. I love immersing myself in nonfiction research, but frankly, nothing immerses me more in a period than reading the literature of the time. In The Fruit of Her Hands, Mayor of Rothenburg wrote a very famous elegy. And so, of course, what do? Is I read his fellow medieval poets, such as Ibn Ezra or Yehuda Halevi. In Beyond the Ghetto Gates, I was thrilled to reread all of Jane Austen because I am a huge Jane Austen fan and even have the t-shirt to prove it. And in writing In the Shadow of the Globe, what do I read? Well, of course, I read the plays, of which we have many, many volumes in this house. This is just one of a series of videos that I plan to post about researching my novels. Up next will be museums, art, and artifacts. I'd love to hear from you about your research and your use of books in research. Please do add some comments so that we can all learn from one another.